Reborn. I deliberately arrived late, delaying the process of registering my marriage with Anthony. In my previous life, after learning I was pregnant, Anthony Koo disappeared with Selena for 20 years. Later, when I was on the verge of death, he returned, looking at Selena's framed photograph. He asked me, if I had waited a little longer before marrying you back then, would things have turned out differently? Chapter 1. When I realized I had been reborn, Anthony was standing at the dormitory entrance, waiting to go to the marriage registry with me. I lied, saying I needed to deliver something to a colleague, and sent him ahead to the marriage office. Once separated from Anthony, I headed up the mountain, lying on Aunt Wang's rocking chair. I gazed at the sea of clouds in front of her house. Basking in the sun, Aunt Wang handed me a roasted sweet potato and asked curiously, "Aren't you supposed to be getting married to Engineer Koo today? What are you doing here?" I took a bite of the warm sweet potato. Smiling, I told her, "Auntie, I had a nightmare." Even after waking up, my heart still feels uneasy. Aunt Wang comforted me. "It was just a dream. What matters is the life of the living. Once you marry Engineer Koo, you'll have good days ahead. What's there to fear about a nightmare?" I froze for a moment before smiling and nodding. "You're right, Auntie. I'll leave after staying here for a bit." Marry Anthony? Not in this lifetime. Chapter 2. In my previous life, right after Anthony and I registered our marriage and stepped out of the marriage hall, he bumped into a young woman. Her name was Selena. She lived in the village where we worked. On our way back, Anthony remained silent the entire time. I thought he was simply becoming more mindful of boundaries now that he was married. I never imagined that it would take me until my deathbed to realize the truth. That very moment, that accidental encounter, was love at first sight for Anthony. He wasn't keeping his distance out of respect. He was regretting it, regretting that he hadn't delayed our marriage by just one more day. From that day forward, Anthony became much colder toward me. He would often sit alone, staring off toward the village. When I asked him why, he avoided answering. After asking a few times with no response and being occupied with work, I eventually stopped asking. I thought that once he had figured things out, he would talk to me on his own. When the village project ended, Anthony and I were assigned to different teams. We had no choice but to live apart. I thought it was only temporary, but with each new assignment, we ended up in completely different parts of the country. I brought it up to Anthony once, but he simply replied indifferently, "We must follow the organization's arrangements." Until one day, when I returned to the capital for a report, I overheard my colleague's conversation. That aside from the first assignment that separated us, every single one afterward had been requested by Anthony himself. We had a huge argument. Afterward, he held me in his arms and apologized. Yet he still refused to explain why. The next morning, Anthony left. I knew then our marriage was over. But life is full of unexpected twists. I found out I was pregnant. When Anthony learned of my pregnancy, his cold demeanor completely changed. He began taking care of me attentively. He clumsily tried to learn how to cook for me. He would press his ear against my belly, listening as if he could hear the baby blowing bubbles. Every night, he would accompany me on walks. Then, one day, Anthony disappeared. I asked countless people, searched for him for a long time. No one knew where he had gone. No one could tell me if he was dead or alive. I went through pregnancy checkups alone, gave birth alone, took my child to the hospital alone, raised my child alone. I arranged the funerals of both our parents alone. I thought he was dead. Yet, in my final moments, as my life faded away, he suddenly appeared before me. Only then did I learn that for the past 20 years, he had been with Selena. They had adopted a son and showered him with all their love. But Selena, burdened by her sorrows, passed away before him. Her biggest regret before she died was that she had never had the chance to be his wife. Anthony told me he was sorry, but that he also resented me. I found it absurd. If he never loved me, why hadn't he told me sooner? He could have divorced me and given Selena the family she longed for. Instead, he abandoned his wife and child, neglected his parents. What right did he have to resent me? The son I had single-handedly raised told me he envied Anthony and Selena's adopted child. who had grown up surrounded by love. He resented me for bringing him into this world without his consent. Only then did I realize, without my knowledge, he had long been in contact with his father, keeping it a secret from me all along. Chapter 3. I stayed at Aunt Wang's house for an hour. After bidding her farewell, I headed straight to the marriage registry. When I arrived, I saw Anthony helping Selena up. His eyes were fixed on her, lost in a daze, his once irritated expression now replaced with admiration. In my past life, I had been too busy helping Selena up and chatting with her to notice Anthony's reaction. But now, viewing the scene as a bystander, everything was so obvious. Anthony, I'm here. Have you been waiting long? Hearing my voice, Anthony tensed up instantly, his movements turning flustered. This. Maria. You're here. I noticed something different in Selena's gaze when she looked at me, unlike the previous life. It was laced with complexity, even resentment. But when I looked again, she had returned to normal, as if it had all been my imagination. I was curious. In this life, the marriage certificate had yet to be registered. Now that Anthony had met Selena earlier than before, what would he choose? Would he break up with me and choose Selena? Or would he repeat the past, marry me but still run away with Selena? It's getting late. Let's go in and get our marriage certificate, I said, pretending to be eager. Anthony's face turned pale. Ouch! My foot hurts! Selena cried out at just the right moment, breaking the brief silence. In my past life, Selena hadn't been injured. So why was she hurt this time? And why was the timing so perfect? Could she have also been reborn? I studied her carefully, searching for any signs, but I found nothing. Anthony took Selena to the clinic. The doctor examined her and concluded that aside from a wound that was already about to heal, there was nothing wrong. Selena's face flushed with embarrassment. Anthony, however, seemed happy. On the way back, as we passed the marriage registry, Anthony hesitated. Maria, they're off work now. How about we come back tomorrow? I replied flatly. We'll see. A marriage certificate should be obtained on an auspicious day. But in this life, there would never be a good day to get married. A faint smile played on my lips. Anthony sighed. All right, I'll let Aunt Wang know when we get back. We had come by bicycle. On the way home, Selena climbed onto Anthony's bike without a second thought. Anthony glanced at me, looking a little embarrassed, but he didn't refuse her. I pretended not to notice and pedaled ahead. The cool breeze carried their voices to me. I couldn't make out their words, but I could hear their happiness, and Anthony's suppressed laughter. How long had it been since I last saw Anthony smile? In my past life, after meeting Selena, he had never smiled at me again. But now, none of this mattered to me anymore. As we entered the village, the villagers saw Selena sitting behind Anthony, one arm wrapped around his waist. When they looked at me, some winked, while others coughed and shook their heads. I knew exactly what they were trying to say, but I simply smiled and returned to my dormitory. Chapter 4. Anthony had already rented a house in preparation for our marriage. Most of our belongings had been moved in. As I passed by, I stopped and stared at the place that was supposed to be our home. 2 bedrooms flanked the central living area, with a small courtyard in the back. In my past life, after returning from the marriage registry, I was filled with happiness when I saw the red wedding decorations plastered around the house. No one knew that just the day before our wedding, the groom had been joyfully setting up our home, only for the bridal chamber's light to be extinguished that very night. That night, like many lonely nights to come, we lay in bed in silence. We did nothing, and yet, neither of us could sleep. Without waiting for Anthony to return, I pushed my bicycle back to the dormitory. Once inside, I took out my transfer letter back to the capital. It was called a transfer, but what was really waiting for me was a promotion and a salary raise. In my past life, I gave up this opportunity for Anthony. 3 months later, we were assigned to different locations, and after that, he made sure we were always worlds apart. Then, I got pregnant. Anthony disappeared. I had to raise our child alone while also taking care of both our parents. Work became overwhelming, and I was gradually moved from a key department to a marginalized one. I never got another chance to advance in my career. When my son was in elementary school, he would always look at me with disappointment. He would say, "Other mothers are so beautiful. Why can't you dress up like Seal, like other women?" Say, what? Selena? The more I recalled, the more terrified I became. Even back then, my son had already been in contact with his missing father, and he had kept it a secret from me for his entire life. How ridiculous. How utterly laughable. That evening, Anthony didn't come to find me like he usually did. I took my meal box and went to the cafeteria alone. Inside, I saw Anthony sitting across from Selena. They were serving each other food. Anthony said something, and Selena covered her mouth, laughing. When he saw me, Anthony froze for a moment before quickly standing up. "Maria, you're here." Selena just got back, and there was nothing to eat at her place, so I brought her here. I was planning to bring you some food later, but I didn't expect you to come so early. Early? The cafeteria was nearly empty. Most of the dishes were already gone. I suddenly remembered my past life. After we got our marriage certificate, Anthony had gone to get dinner, but I had waited for hours, and when he finally returned, his hands were empty. He had simply told me, "The food ran out. Just bear with it for one night." That night, the only sound in our house was the grumbling of my empty stomach. So this was it. Even back then, Anthony had already started caring for Selena. I said nothing as I walked past him. I packed up whatever food was left and brought it back to my dorm. I had barely started eating when someone knocked on the door. It was Anthony and Selena. Anthony looked at me with a complicated expression and cleared his throat. "Maria, I want to discuss something with you." I stared at him silently. Anthony glanced at Selena, who stood timidly behind him, as if seeking protection. His eyes were filled with tenderness, and when he spoke again, his tone was more resolute. "Maria, Selena just came back from the city. You know she lives alone, and her house hasn't been lived in for a long time. It needs a lot of cleaning." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Since we haven't officially registered yet, I was thinking maybe we could let Selena stay in our house for a few days." I looked at Selena. She shrank back, like a frightened little rabbit, hiding behind Anthony. In this life and the last, I had seen two completely different versions of Selena. If she hadn't been reborn, I wouldn't believe it. But I had no interest in playing along with her act. I didn't want this man anymore. Whatever Selena did now was meaningless to me. "Sure," I said casually. "It's your house. You can decide." Anthony hadn't expected me to agree so easily. His prepared speech got stuck in his throat. "But," I added, "I don't like other people touching my things. I'll go collect my belongings later." Anthony was stunned for a second before hurriedly waving his hands. "No. No need. I'll just move your stuff to another room." So that was it. Not only did he want Selena to stay in our house, he wanted her to sleep in our bed. How absurd. I caught the slight curl of Selena's lips. She was smiling, too. Chapter 5. After dinner, I took a flashlight and headed to the house to pack my things. When I arrived, Anthony was busy making the bed for Selena, using the brand new bedsheet I had carefully chosen for our wedding night. He looked startled when he saw me. "Maria, why are you here? I already moved your stuff to my room." "Oh," I responded casually and turned to go fetch my belongings. Anthony followed me, his expression complicated, his eyes filled with emotions I couldn't decipher. "Maria." Before he could say more, Selena ran out of the room. "Anthony Gitch, isn't that bedsheet meant for your wedding with Maria Gia? Is it really okay for me to sleep on it? I don't mind. Really. I can even sleep on dirty clothes if needed." Her voice trailed off, growing softer as she spoke. I saw the look in Anthony's eyes as he gazed at her, filled with tenderness and pity. Then he turned to me. "Maria, you see, all the sheets at home are new. This one." I didn't miss the flicker of triumph in Selena's eyes. But she had no idea, Anthony, this pathetic excuse for a man, had ceased to be of any worth to me the moment I was reborn. I shrugged indifferently. "You bought it with your money. It's your call." "Thank you, Maria Gia." "Anthony Gitch, you two are so good to me." "Wow, I never imagined that one day I'd get to live in Anthony Gidge's house and sleep in his bed. Her words were oddly phrased. Anthony noticed it too, hesitating as he looked at me, as if testing my reaction. Realizing what she had just said, Selena quickly covered her mouth, putting on an apologetic, guilty expression. "Oh no, I didn't mean that, Maria. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Don't misunderstand. There's nothing between me and Anthony Gidge. Really, I should just sleep on some dirty clothes instead." She turned to grab a bundle of soiled laundry. Anthony quickly stopped her. I patted her shoulder reassuringly. "It's fine. Really, sleep comfortably. It's not a big deal to me." Anthony studied my face, searching for any sign of emotion, but I gave him nothing. I had no time to waste on him. Selena, meanwhile, kept playing the same old game, pretending to be flustered, making things seem worse than they were, hoping to provoke me so that she could appear weak and innocent before Anthony, trying to make him hate me. But in this life, I couldn't care less. What she should truly be grateful for was that in our past life, she had kept her distance. This time, she was overplaying her hand. I leaned in close, whispering into her ear, "Selena Mimi, you're overthinking things. Why would I care? Anthony Gidge is just looking out for you. It makes sense, doesn't it? Even if he wants to marry you, I have no objections, but do you think he will marry you?" I smiled and winked at her. Selena's face twisted into an ugly expression. She couldn't understand. How could I be so different from the naive, easily deceived Maria of our previous life? But then realization dawned in her eyes, and she smirked. I packed up my things and slung the bag over my shoulder, ready to leave. Anthony suddenly called out to me. He stepped forward, reaching out to take the bag from me. I dodged. What a joke. If Selena had been reborn, too, she wasn't going to settle for being a mistress this time. She wanted to legitimize herself. She had already claimed Anthony as her personal property. I had no intention of getting caught up in their mess. Anthony saw my evasive movement, and his eyes filled with hurt. "Maria, are you angry?" "I can explain. How rare. In our past life, he wasted my entire lifetime without ever explaining a single thing. Now, suddenly, he wanted to talk. But I already knew exactly what he was going to say. It was nothing more than excuses, disguising his emotional betrayal under the pretense of looking out for someone else. An explanation? Pointless. And besides, Selena wouldn't allow it. Ah, right on cue. Selena let out a sharp cry, and Anthony immediately turned back, abandoning me mid-conversation as he rushed toward her. I scoffed, tightened my grip on my bag, and walked away without a second thought. Chapter 6. In my past life, I was married to Anthony for 21 years and died at the age of 45. That was considered an early death. When I gave birth to that ungrateful son, I suffered severe hemorrhaging. My health had been ruined since then. Before my body even had a chance to recover, I had to take care of our child alone. I had to deal with Anthony's unreasonable, demanding parents. I had to juggle work while desperately searching for Anthony, who had disappeared. My body deteriorated day by day. Raising my son to the age of 20 had already been the result of my relentless efforts. After Anthony vanished, I never had a peaceful night's sleep again. But now, in this life, I hadn't married him. I hadn't exhausted myself to the brink of death. I was healthy. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I slept soundly through the night. The next morning, I applied for leave and informed my supervisor that I had decided to accept the transfer back to the capital. My supervisor looked surprised. "Didn't you say you didn't want to be separated from Engineer Koo after getting married?" I shook my head. "I won't be marrying him. My career is my priority now." My supervisor smiled approvingly. In my past life, he had also tried to persuade me. He once told me, "With your abilities, you have a much higher potential for growth." But I had been blinded. I had thrown away such a great opportunity for the sake of a worthless man. This time, I asked my supervisor to keep my departure a secret. We agreed on the date of my transfer. After leaving his office, I headed straight for the train station. Train tickets were difficult to buy at this time, requiring long hours of waiting in line. As I cycled past the house that was supposed to be our marital home, I glanced through the fence. Anthony and Selena were crouched in the courtyard, brushing their teeth together. Anthony naturally reached for the towel hanging on the clothesline and gently wiped Selena's hands. Selena gazed at him, her eyes filled with deep affection. It seemed that after just one night, their relationship had advanced significantly. Noticing me passing by, Anthony's face turned pale. He quickly put some distance between himself and Selena. I withdrew my gaze, unfazed by his guilty conscience or her look of triumph. At the train station, I used some money to store my bicycle before joining the crowd in the ticket hall. At this time, people traveling far carried large bundles on their backs. From sewing needles to bedding and wicker baskets, they packed whatever they could onto the train. Looking at the crowded mass of people, I decided to travel light. Bulky items, I would sell or give them away. After waiting in line for a long time, I chose a sleeper ticket over a standing ticket. I had suffered enough in my past life. In this life, I wanted to treat myself better. By the time I left the station, it was already the afternoon. Having lived another lifetime, I had forgotten some details, like bringing food to eat while waiting in line. I had missed lunch in the process of buying the ticket. Now, I was starving. Following my memories, I searched for a state-owned restaurant. In my past life, this was where Anthony and I had met for our arranged date. He was good-looking, with fair skin, just the kind of clean, neat appearance I liked. Like me, he was a technical worker. Both our families were based in the capital. I had thought that would make things convenient in the future. He, too, was satisfied with my appearance and background. So, we decided to give it a try. During our courtship, Anthony wasn't particularly romantic, but he wasn't bad to me either. In daily life, he took care of me. At work, he would discuss and solve problems with me. Our relationship wasn't filled with passion. It was about compatibility. I had believed we would live a quiet, stable life together, but he blindsided me with a bombshell. Anthony proposed to me after 2 months of dating. At the time, he had looked genuinely happy about marrying me. But in the end, childhood friendships and steady relationships could never compare to the excitement of newfound love. Selena's sudden appearance awakened that feeling in him. His heart wavered. Love came out of nowhere, and he fell deeply. But of all the mistakes he made, the worst was selfishly abandoning everything to chase after it, ruining my life in the process. Chapter 7. After parking my bicycle, I stepped into the state-owned restaurant. It wasn't a busy time, so I spotted Anthony and Selena sitting in the corner right away. Selena noticed me first. She stood up and waved at me enthusiastically. "Maria Gia, are you here to eat? Anthony Gidge and I are having a meal together. Why don't you join us? Don't be shy. It's just a matter of adding another pair of chopsticks." I had to give it to her. This was top-tier green tea behavior. With just 2 sentences, she had positioned herself as the main person in Anthony's life. "Oh, I wouldn't want to impose. Wouldn't I be interrupting your date?" I said with a bright smile. Glancing at Anthony, Anthony visibly panicked. He quickly stood up and pulled out a chair for me. "Aw, Maria Gia, don't misunderstand. Anthony Gidge and I, our relationship isn't what you think it is. He just thinks I'm too skinny and wants to help me eat better." Oh great, another flex. I ignored Anthony's gesture and took a seat beside Selena. Anthony awkwardly scratched his nose and sat back down. Then, I looked at the table. Wow, the entire table was covered with rich, expensive dishes. Braised pork, fish, stir-fried vegetables, soups. This meal alone probably cost half of Anthony's monthly salary. So generous, for her. Selena picked up a piece of braised pork and placed it in my bowl. "Maria Gia, try this." Anthony Gidge said the braised pork here is the best and insisted on ordering it for me. He even said he'd pack an extra portion for me to take home. "Here, have some fish too. It's so delicious." Anthony Gidge said he knows how to cook this himself. He promised to make it for me all the time once we get back. Anthony can cook? That was news to me. When I was pregnant in my past life, he had stumbled around the kitchen like a headless chicken, either dropping pots or breaking bowls. In the end, I had to kick him out and cook for myself. So love really could be pretended. Huh? I picked up the braised pork and tasted it carefully. It was good. In this era, Food was made with real ingredients. The pork was fragrant and rich, and the river fish had none of that strange oily taste that later generations would come to know. I took my time savoring it, paying no attention to whatever Selena was saying. Then, Selena suddenly let out a dramatic yelp. It startled me so much that my chopsticks almost slipped from my fingers. Oh, Maria, yeah. I'm so sorry. I got scared by a fish bone just now. Scared by a fish bone? Really? Now, where was I? Oh right, Maria, yeah. Have you ever tasted Anthony Gidge's cooking? If you haven't, why don't you come over tonight? He promised to cook for me, right? Anthony Gidge? Oh, so that's what this was about. Selena had clearly noticed how unaffected I was, so she deliberately made a scene, hoping to remind me of her presence. Sure, keep eating. Let's see who you'll flaunt to once I leave. I smiled warmly. Selena Mimi, you're so lucky. I've known your Anthony Gidge for so long, and I never even knew he could cook. But you two have only known each other for, what, 2 days? And he's already offering to cook for you. I guess I'll get to enjoy the benefits too. Selena had been hoping to make me jealous. She hadn't expected me to not care at all. She froze. Anthony's face turned an ugly shade of green, then white. I continued eating, completely ignoring their reactions. When my plate of scallion tofu arrived, I pushed it toward them, inviting them to share. The atmosphere at the table instantly became awkward, and finally, things were quiet enough for me to enjoy my meal in peace. Chapter 8. After leaving the restaurant, I casually bid farewell to Selena and Anthony before cycling away. I was heading to the post office to call my parents. In my past life, after Anthony disappeared, I had to raise our child alone, take care of his parents, and work a full-time job. I ran around like a spinning top, exhausted every single day. I never understood why. But even though my family background was just as good as theirs, Anthony's parents had always looked down on me. Not only did they refuse to help me with the child, but they also went out of their way to make my life harder. If I so much as showed the slightest bit of displeasure, they would go to my workplace and cause a scene. At that time, having a stable job wasn't easy, and I had a child to support. So, I endured it. My parents, worried for me, helped as much as they could while taking care of their own grandchildren. They even wanted to find me a new husband. But when Anthony's parents found out, they stormed into my parents' home, making a huge scene, accusing us of trying to drive them to their deaths. And that wasn't the worst of it. Whenever a man expressed interest in me, Anthony's mother would drag my son along, following behind me. Then, right in front of my date, she would have my son burst into tears and throw a tantrum. After a while, no one was willing to meet with me anymore. Eventually, I gave up on the idea of remarrying. I devoted myself entirely to raising my son. During those years, my parents endured so much because of Anthony's family. But more than anything, they worried about me. Even on their deathbeds, their biggest concern was me. The phone call connected quickly, hearing my parents' voices again after a lifetime. My tears fell uncontrollably. Hearing the choke in my voice, my parents panicked. They immediately assumed Anthony had bullied me and were furious, ready to come and give him a piece of their mind. I quickly reassured them, explaining everything that had happened and my decision to leave. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, my parents simply said, "If this is the decision you've carefully thought through, we respect it." Only then did I finally let out a breath of relief. I told them about my transfer back to the capital. My train would leave in 3 days. My mother immediately said that they would prepare all my favorite foods and wait for me at home. When I returned to my dormitory and opened the door, I found Anthony sitting at my desk, flipping through my study materials. I had nearly forgotten he also had a key to my room. I glanced at the locked drawer that held my transfer papers and let out a breath of relief. Right now, my relationship with Anthony was in an uncertain state. The last thing I wanted was for anything unexpected to happen before I left. Seeing me return, Anthony quickly stood up and poured me a glass of water. He clearly had something to say, but he hesitated. I sat on my bed, slowly sipping my tea, waiting. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He turned to face me. "Maria, Selena and I, it's not what you think. I swallowed my tea and replied flatly. What do I think? Anthony was stunned. If I were still the old Maria, it wouldn't have mattered whether he explained or not. I would have believed him, but I had already lived an entire lifetime. I had seen, endured, and suffered through the miserable fate he had given me. Even if he explained himself 1,000 times, it would all be meaningless to me, because in my past life, as I lay on my deathbed, Anthony himself had told me that his love for Selena had been love at first sight, that she was his true love, and that what we had was nothing in comparison. Chapter 9. I had always been the third wheel in Anthony and Selena's love story, a flaw, a thorn in their perfect romance. Maria, whether you believe it or not, I only want to take care of Selena because she's an orphan. Life is hard for her. Anthony's voice was full of forced sincerity, but his eyes darted around, unable to meet mine. If even he didn't believe his own words, why should I? But still, I played along. All right, I believe you. Now, can you leave? I've had a long day and want to rest. Oh, and leave my dormitory key behind. Anthony's face stiffened instantly. He knew I didn't believe him. After he left, I wiped down the chair he had been sitting on. It felt dirty. Then, I began packing. I hadn't been here long, just 6 months, so I didn't have much. Clothes, bedding, daily essentials. The real problem was the things Anthony and I had bought for our marriage. Before I left, I'd need to settle accounts with him. Just as I was thinking this, there was another knock at the door. It was Anthony. He held a small tin box in his hands, grinning as he handed it to me. Here, Maria, open it. Inside was money, cash and ration tickets. Anthony smiled. I've already thought about it. Once we're married, I'll hand over my salary to you. You can manage the household expenses, and I'll just take a set allowance each month. I stared at him. This Anthony felt like a stranger. In my past life, not only had he never given me his salary, I had never even seen a single coin from him after our marriage. When I nearly died in childbirth, his parents refused to spend a penny to save me. They even said, "Let her die. Keeping her alive is a waste of money." It was my parents and my brother's family who scraped together money to beg the doctors to save me. Later, when his parents got sick, when they needed medicine, when they passed away, I paid for everything. During the 20 years Anthony vanished, he had been secretly in contact with our son, and most likely, with his parents as well. Had he ever sent them money? I didn't know, but I did know that before his mother passed away, she called my son into her room. When he came out, he tried to look sad, but in his eyes, I saw excitement. After her funeral, I searched her room. I found nothing of value. Later, when I fell ill and couldn't afford treatment, I just endured it, and endured, until I couldn't anymore, until the very end. And yet, thinking back now, had Anthony known I was sick? Had my son, withholding whatever money his grandmother had given him, just stood by and watched? A deep, suffocating ache settled in my chest. Anthony noticed me trembling, concerned. He reached out to support me. I shoved him away, leaning against the wall. I took slow, steady breaths. It took a while before I could suppress the pain in my heart. When I looked at Anthony again, there was nothing left in my eyes but indifference. Anthony visibly tensed. I glanced at the tin box filled with money. Since he had brought it to me, I wasn't about to lose out. The debts from my past life were beyond settling. But in this life, I would settle everything. I took half of the money equal to my share of the wedding purchases. Then, I handed the rest, along with the box, back to him. Anthony looked confused, but he didn't ask. Even the slowest person could tell that something between us had shifted. Something was slipping out of his control. He hesitated, glancing at me again and again, before finally leaving. That night, I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of my past life, of how Anthony's parents had told him about my life-threatening childbirth complications, and how he had simply responded, over the phone. I dreamed of my son, still in his swaddling clothes, being taken in secret to meet Anthony. Anthony had known I was searching for him, and yet, He had conspired with everyone to keep me in the dark. No wonder all those years, no one I met ever dared mention him to me. Then, I dreamed of my colleagues, the ones who had worked with me for years. They spoke of Anthony and Selena's love story with admiration. A love so pure, so passionate, it was fate. As for me, to them, I was nothing more than a mistake. An unfortunate accident, just a red thread the old matchmaker tied wrong when he was drunk. How utterly, laughably cruel. I woke up with my pillow damp from tears, but unlike my past life, this time, I was still alive, still healthy, and this time, I had a second chance. Chapter 10. The next 2 days were busy with my work handover. I had also agreed to join Selena for dinner at Anthony's place, as promised, and since neither of them mentioned the money box incident, I assumed that matter was settled. But then, that evening, Selena came looking for me. She warmly invited me over for dinner, not wanting to seem rude. I agreed. At dinner time, I arrived with a small gift in hand, but just as I reached the courtyard, I saw Anthony and Selena in an embrace. His hands were groping the softest part of her body. The moment they saw me, Anthony's face turned as white as a sheet, paler than I had ever seen it before. Selena, too, had a look of shock and horror. In a flurry, she fumbled to button up her almost fully undone blouse. I said nothing. I simply turned around and left. Selena had invited me over for a grand meal. Well, I had eaten. The gift? No need to give it anymore. I hadn't gone far before I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Anthony caught up to me, grabbing my arm. Maria, please, let me explain. Selena and it's not what you think. I turned to face him, my expression calm. Oh, not what I think? I let my gaze drift downward. Are you referring to how you two were half-dressed, embracing each other, or to how your hand was somewhere it shouldn't have been? Anthony opened his mouth, but no words came out. Over the past 2 days, while I had been busy with work, Aunt Wang had been keeping me updated. She despised mistresses, especially mistresses like Selena, who not only knowingly played the role of the other woman but also had the audacity to flaunt it in front of the wife-to-be. She had been eagerly reporting their disgusting behavior. She told me, people in the village had seen Selena deliberately rubbing against Anthony. He didn't move away. They had seen them sharing a single bowl of food. They had seen them holding hands when no one was around. And now, standing before me, Anthony looked utterly pathetic. I couldn't understand. Why go to such lengths to plead with me after doing all of this? Did he still expect me to be the same as in my past life? To be the dutiful wife who took care of his parents while he and Selena played house somewhere else? I took a step closer, looking him straight in the eyes. Before Selena appeared, I was the only one who could stand close to you. But just 1 hour after meeting her, you were already taking her to the hospital. After 3 hours, you let her ride on your bicycle, arms wrapped around your waist. At 5 hours, you left me behind and took her to dinner. At 7 hours, you let her move into our marital home, sleep in our bed, use the sheets I prepared for our wedding night. After 1 day, you spent half a month's salary to buy her a grand meal. And also after 1 day, you promise to personally cook for her. You don't avoid her touches. You share food from the same bowl. You hold hands with her when no one is looking. And now, you're holding her, touching her. Tell me, Anthony, can you still look me in the eye and swear that you two are innocent? Do you really think I would believe you? With each word, Anthony's body trembled more violently. His lips parted, trying to form words, but nothing came out. I wasn't done. I gave him a slow, deliberate smile. Let me take a guess. Why are you so desperate to explain this to me? Why did you even try to bribe me with that money? On the day we were supposed to get our marriage certificate, you fell for Selena at first sight. Selena was also interested in you, so she faked an injury to delay the registration. And in that moment, when you felt something for her, you no longer truly wanted to marry me. But in the past few days, you've probably made up your mind. You love Selena. You want to spend your days and nights with her. I looked into his eyes, and with each word, I tore apart the last of his illusions. But at the same time, you need a dutiful wife, someone who will take care of your aging parents. Handle all the burdens you don't want to deal with. Even better if that wife can see your parents through their final days. I tilted my head, my voice chillingly soft. Isn't that right, Anthony? The moment I finished speaking, Anthony's head snapped up. His eyes, filled with shock and disbelief, stared at me. I had exposed his deepest, unspoken thoughts. And for a moment, I felt nothing but sorrow. Sorrow for the entire lifetime I had wasted on such a calculating man. Sorrow for the tiny moments of happiness I had once believed in, only to realize now, they had been nothing but a joke. I could no longer lie to myself. And more importantly, I would never let Anthony lie to me again. Chapter 11. That night, I returned to my dormitory and began packing the last of my belongings. And that was when Selena showed up. She stood at the door, glaring at me with a face full of hostility. Maria, so you're finally back. I glanced at her, unbothered. She let out a scoff. Then, with a sneer, she looked me up and down, her eyes filled with mockery and scorn. In our past life, you stole the position of Anthony G's wife, but what did it get you? You spent your whole life as a maid for his parents. You worked so hard to raise that ungrateful son, only for him to call me mom behind your back. Ha ha ha. Can you imagine? How ridiculous. Your husband belonged to me. Your son belonged to me. And in this life, even though you've also been reborn, you still can't change the fact that Anthony G loves me. In this life, Anthony G's wife will be me. It can only be me. I had long since given up on my past life's son, but hearing that he had secretly called Selena mom still made my heart ache. Just for a moment. Then I let it go. It's fine. It's fine because, in this life, I won't be bringing him into this world. No matter what he thinks. No matter if he resents me, I won't give him the chance to betray me again. Selena continued talking, acting like a triumphant rooster who had just won a fight. But when she finally noticed the way I was looking at her, there was no anger in my gaze. There was pity, sympathy, indifference, but not even a flicker of rage. Her victorious posture crumbled. She fled. She didn't understand. To me, she was nothing but another pitiful person. In our past life, I had been the one supporting Anthony from the shadows, allowing them to live out their romantic fantasy without worries. But in this life, with me gone, who would clean up their mess? Would they still be able to live as happily as before? Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stepped outside to look at the moon, only to be startled by the dark figure sitting at my doorstep. The light from my dorm room flickered across his face. It was Anthony. His entire body reeked of alcohol. I had no idea how long he had been sitting there. Even after being reborn, I still couldn't understand him. I grabbed my flashlight and went to find Selena. She looked stunned when I told her to take Anthony home, but she said nothing. She simply followed me back. Anthony had passed out. Selena struggled to haul him up, dragging him away. I didn't help. This was her choice. Let her take responsibility. The next morning, as I was leaving with my suitcase, Aunt Wong came rushing over. She grabbed my hand, eyes shining with excitement. Come, you have to see this. She led me straight to what was supposed to be my marital home. There, in the courtyard, was Anthony, furious, staring down at Selena, who sat on the ground, disheveled, her clothes barely covering her. It didn't take long to understand what had happened. After dragging Anthony home last night, Selena had snapped. She thought about how he had chased after me, how he had returned looking shattered, how he had drunkenly collapsed in front of my dormitory, and how, even in his dreams, he had been calling out my name. She couldn't stand it. So, while he was still drunk, she took advantage of the situation. Even though she knew he was confusing her for me, she still slept with him. Hearing this from the villagers, I only felt disgusted. I turned to leave, but before I could go, Anthony grabbed me. Maria, please, let me explain. This man was unbelievable. I took a deep breath. Then, looking him directly in the eye, I said calmly, Anthony, I thought I made myself clear yesterday. Anthony searched my gaze, desperately trying to find some trace of emotion, a remnant of the love I once had for him. Something, anything, but he found nothing. Only apathy, because I didn't care anymore. I didn't feel anger, because I wasn't angry. None of this mattered. And at last, he finally realized. I truly, completely, did not care about him anymore. His grip on my arm loosened. His voice was low, almost whispering. I'm sorry. Sorry? For what? For this life? Or for the last one? Chapter 12. I left Yuanshan village. I returned to the capital city. Seeing my parents, healthy and happy, brought me to tears. Every day since my rebirth, I might have looked carefree on the surface, but deep inside, I had always carried an overwhelming weight. That was my entire past life, so heavy that it suffocated me. How could I possibly let it go so easily? Anthony and Selena deserved to be torn apart, piece by piece, but I had my parents, my brother, and my sister-in-law. I couldn't ruin my new chance at life just for the sake of those two wretched people. Only now, seeing my parents still unharmed, still healthy, did I finally feel the weight on my shoulders lift. I spent a few days with them, fulfilling the simple happiness of a family, loving parents, a devoted child. Then, I threw myself back into work, without the burden of a son and those insufferable in-laws. I performed exceptionally well at my job. It wasn't long before I got promoted and received a raise. I was even offered a position as a university professor, fulfilling my long-cherished dream of becoming a teacher. I heard news about Anthony again a year later. In the end, Selena still fulfilled her dream from the previous life. She married Anthony and became his official wife. Not long after their wedding, Anthony brought her back to the capital city. But the Koo family was not easy to deal with. In my past life, despite my good family background and stable job, they still looked down on me. Naturally, they despised Selena even more, since she had no job at all. So, they used every possible means to make her life miserable. The Koo household was constantly in chaos. Anthony wanted to take Selena away from all of it, but his parents refused, throwing tantrums and causing a scene as if their lives depended on it. To them, Selena, unemployed and having married up into their family, was beneath them. They resented her for ruining the marriage they had once planned for their son. Their hatred ran deep. No matter what, they wouldn't allow Anthony to take Selena away. They wanted her to stay, to serve them like a workhorse. But childhood sweethearts could never withstand the allure of new passion. Romantic nights could never outlast the daily grind of life. With time, Anthony saw Selena for what she really was, nothing special. Without Anthony's so-called love, Selena was no different from an ordinary, loud-mouthed woman. Before long, Anthony applied for a job transfer. This time, he didn't take Selena with him. Later, I heard that Selena fought back. She and the Koo parents tormented each other, making life unbearable for everyone. And then, the inevitable happened. Anthony cheated. In a fit of rage, Selena stormed into his workplace and sued him. She accused him of taking advantage of her while drunk, back when they were in Yuanshan village. That, I hadn't expected. Then again, anyone who could willingly be a homewrecker for an entire lifetime was never a kind soul. What did surprise me was Anthony. In my past life, he had hated me for Selena's dying regret. He had grieved bitterly in front of her portrait. He had repented in agony when I left. Yet in this life, his love for Selena didn't seem to last that long after all. I had overestimated him. Someone rotten to the core only ever loves themselves. True remorse? Impossible. He was just bitter about what he had lost and what he never got to have. But none of that mattered anymore. This time, I had escaped that prison. The road ahead was bright and full of possibilities.